Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the Garden Hour with MU Extension. We're so glad that you're able to join us today. My name is Donna Aufdenberg, and I'm your host for today. I'm located down by Cape Girardeau in the southeast portion of the state. As always, we have great information for you today. Lots of good topics. Definitely keep sending in those questions and those pictures. We love to see what all of you are inquiring about. I will put up the state. If I can get my computer to work, there we go. So here's the state with all the horticulture specialists throughout the state that cover the areas. You might take a look at where you're located in the state and see who covers your area. If there's a vacancy or opening in that area, just look to the next person. That would be the person covering your area. We try not to draw territory, so if you see somebody that you're familiar with and you want to contact them, feel free to contact them. We always enjoy hearing from any of you. Manoj has changed his name to ask your questions here, so if any time during this session you have questions, please send them to him. Once again, ask your questions here is what you're going to look for in the chat. Make sure if you ask questions towards the end of our session, make sure to include your email address. That way, if we run out of time today, we can still reach you and get an answer to you. We are actually going to start with our weather report. It's a video from Zack Leasor. So let's go ahead and get that started.
Hello everyone, this is our Missouri weekly weather summary, and now that the Garden Hour is moving towards the fall and winter schedule and we won't be meeting as frequently, I wanted to maybe expand our weekly weather summary into more of a broader outlook for October and beyond. And so to start today, I wanted to actually take a look back at the month of September and look at some of our statewide averages and look at how our temperature and precipitation compared to normal, and also see how this positions us for the year of 2023 as a whole. And so if we look at September, it was a dry month, and in fact, our statewide average ended up being our 17th driest September on record going back to 1895. So on average across the state, most locations were around 2 inches below normal for rainfall. If we look at the county map here on the left, this just shows the county precipitation ranks for September. And so anywhere you see those brown colors, we saw counties that were drier than usual, and anywhere we see in southwest and south central Missouri, there were several locations that were closer to near normal precipitation, with 4 counties that were actually above normal. And most of this precipitation came from just a couple of events during the month of September, but definitely helped push those totals back up to the average. Elsewhere, we were pretty dry throughout the month, and you can see that on the map here. And this was just September, which was a dry month, but this really continued our drought during the year of 2023. And so drought really began in the month of September. So if we look at our 6-month period of April through September, this 6-month period is actually the 11th driest on record. And so here, going back to April, our average deficit's closer to almost 6 inches across the state. But again, similar to September, we've also seen warmer than normal temperatures throughout this time period. So September was 38th warmest with temperatures 2 degrees above normal Fahrenheit. Not as extreme when we look at this 6-month period, but still seeing temperatures running about 1 degree above normal. Now, if we look at our entire year to date, so going from January to September, we did have a very warmer than normal January through March. And so combining these 9 months, we see that we're actually on track for our 10th warmest year on record as a state. And so temperatures right now are about 2.5 degrees above normal for the whole year to date. When we add those early January through March months into the precipitation, it doesn't show as much of a drought signal, as we're really only the 37th driest year on record. But again, droughts really only impacted the state this year from April to September. Now, these are just some statewide averages, which don't always give us the whole story and show some of the more localized patterns here. So it's also useful to look at some of the county averages here as well. And so this table shows our September 2023 rainfall amounts per county and their rankings as well. And I pulled the counties here that experienced the top 5 driest September on record. And you can see there's many counties led by Audrain and Adair County, which actually had their 2nd and 3rd driest Septembers respectively. But no matter the rank here, you can see if we look at the values for precipitation in this table, all of these counties on average received less than an inch of rainfall for the month. And we know that our September normal for most of these locations is pretty close to around 4 inches. And so a lot of these deficits are 3 inches for the month of September, which was really not good for continuing those drought conditions during this month. Also, if we look at our county precipitation rank, again, looking at that 6-month period that encapsulates the drought much better. Here we see on this map, if you notice the kind of darker brown counties really look pretty close to what the drought monitor is depicting right now. And so these are areas that are going to be in that dark orange or red, which are going to show those D2 to D3 severe to extreme drought conditions. And when we look at this 6-month period, we do have several counties that are experiencing a top 5 driest April to September during the historical period. And so looking at these, we can also see some of the county average precipitation anomalies. And in some of the worst counties like Lewis and Marion County, those deficits are close to a foot going back to April. And these are county average data. So also it's possible that there's some more localized areas and also stations that are even farther behind on rainfall, and we could expect some more localized higher deficits as well. So some really impressive county average anomalies seen throughout this 6-month period here. And this is reflected in the current drought monitor. And so here's our map that was released on Thursday, October 12th last week. And really we've seen continued expansion of these drought areas and degradation in some of the severity really going back through the second half of August and in September. So on the right here, we look at our 8-week change across Missouri, and anywhere you see those yellows and oranges, that's where those drought severities and conditions have gotten worse during this time period. Again, in southwest Missouri and even a small area in northeastern Missouri, there's been a few rainfall events over the past 8 weeks that have actually led to some improvement, but a large portion of the state continues to see this drought evolve and conditions become worse throughout the past 8 weeks. So we're not heading in the right direction with our rainfall at the moment. Now, another interesting story over the past couple weeks has been our really arrival of fall-like weather and some of the cooler temperatures, especially overnight, that we've experienced. And so the past couple of weekends have really brought some overnight lows that dipped into the 30s. And some locations have seen their first frost, and even a few stations that have dipped below the freezing mark over the past couple weeks. And so this table here shows some of the lowest temperatures that were recorded according to the Missouri Mesonet from October 10th to October 16th over the past week here. And I just pulled the counties here that have seen their low temperatures at 36 degrees or below. So we would typically see frost occurring at 36 degrees, freeze at 32 degrees. And we can see a good portion of the state, according to these low temperatures, has experienced their first frost. If we look at our climate normals here, especially across the northern tier of counties across the state, saw some of those frost conditions 2 weekends ago, and this was really right on schedule according to our climate normals. And even some of the freeze events we're starting to see as well are pretty close to those normals there. Now, looking across southern Missouri and southeast Missouri, still not as close to reaching those frost and freeze marks, but that's expected. We do see that occur a few weeks after northern and central Missouri based on those historical normals there. Looking ahead, it doesn't look like for the next week we would see a widespread frost or freeze event. Temperatures really look to remain normal to above normal with a pretty quiet weather pattern over the next week. And so here this line graph is showing a model spread of forecast temperatures. And so you can see some variability, but overall until about Monday, temperatures remaining pretty constant and pretty comfortable really. So highs ranging from the upper 60s to near 75 in Columbia, and we'll see some pretty similar conditions statewide, lows around 45 degrees. Now, going into early next week, a bit of a cool down if we look around Monday. temperatures might be below normal here, but then a pretty strong signal for a warm up going into next week. So looking at Tuesday and Wednesday, it's looking likely our temperatures will be in the 70s, which is going to be around 10 degrees above normal for this type of year. We look at our normals for Columbia, and over the next 2 weeks, we move from an average high of around 67 to 61 by the first day of November there. To go along with these temperatures, I mentioned briefly that it's a pretty quiet period. There's a few spotty chances for maybe some really light showers over the next week, but overall, most of the state should stay dry. And so the map on the left shows our 1 to 7 day forecast for precipitation totals. And we can see that we do see some green and even some blue in southwest Missouri that's indicating rainfall in the forecast. But on the right, I've shown the map that's just for our day 7 forecast. So this is from 7 a.m. approximately next Tuesday to next Wednesday. And we can see that most of the rainfall in our weekly forecast is actually just from day 7. And so we'll pretty much stay dry until next Tuesday. And then when we can really start to expect rain chances to ramp up. And that's because there's growing confidence and kind of a pattern shift in the end of October where we could really flip to a much wetter pattern. And so here we see from the Climate Prediction Center, looking at these 6 to 10 day outlooks, which would be valid for next week, we see those above normal temperatures that are looking likely to occur. And then we also see a large axis of above normal precipitation really across most of the central United States and Intermountain West and extending into Missouri as well. And a lot of this pattern continues in 8 to 14 days out, going towards the end of October. And so here we still see some of these above normal temperatures and precipitation shifting towards the east, but it does hint that we could see a wetter pattern develop at the end of next week and continue towards the end of October, and even maybe into the beginning of November with those above normal precipitation chances, which would be really helpful for starting to think about drought recovery, especially in the near term with the dry week forecasted ahead. And so I do want to highlight that the Climate Prediction Center has released some pretty low-end risk outlooks for heavy precipitation and actually a risk of high winds as well. So this is late next week, so October 25th through the 27th. And chances are pretty low here. These are slight risks of heavy precipitation and high winds, so really only about a 20% chance. But at this kind of forecast lead time, the main kind of statement from these outlooks is that there is a chance for locally heavy rainfall over a large part of the southern Great Plains and into Missouri here, and a large chance for those higher winds to occur. And so this really shows the potential for a slow-moving precipitation system that could dump a lot of rainfall. It's too early to know or to talk about amounts or exactly where that might occur, but highlighting a broad area in response. And similar for winds, along with this rain, we could likely see a strong system that brings some of those winds along with the front as well. And so really just keeping our eye out for a larger system that might develop late next week. And then finally, to end today, looking at the Climate Prediction Center forecast or outlook for October through December, equal chances in our part of the country for temperatures, not much of a signal there. But when we look at our precipitation outlook, really seeing kind of an El Nino pattern with wetter precipitation conditions towards our southeast and drier across portions of the northern U.S. and Missouri right on the line there. So we'll have to see how the next 3 months fare as far as our precipitation. We're already a little below normal for October at this point. And all things considered, with not a strong signal pointing towards above normal precipitation over the next few months, we do see here in our seasonal drought outlook forecast for drought to persist through December. And so this forecast could certainly change, but right now leaning towards staying on the drier end or maybe more near normal over the next couple of months. And so that's all I've got for today. Thanks, and as usual, I'll list my contact information here, so feel free to reach out with any questions.
It's always great to get a weather report like that during the garden hour. And I think it's one of my favorite parts of the garden hour because it always gives me a good idea of what's coming up weather-wise. So we always like to extend our thank you to Zack for the weather report. At this point, I will turn it over to Ramon as your moderator.
Oh, thank you, Donna. Okay, so we're gonna go today for the questions that you all have submitted. And remember, we would like to have your questions to keep going with this garden hour. So the first questions that we have is interested in how to go about changing our lawn to native plants, but worried that we will end up with a yard full of wild, ugly grasses and weeds. Will there be any seminar or other existing resources when using native plants in lieu of grass on our lawns? And Tamra is going to address these questions today. Tamra?
Thanks, Ramon. And I like this question. It's more nuanced than we'd like to think. Having native plants is really good. Converting your lawn to native plants is a whole different ballgame. So let's talk about this. This is an interesting quote from Doug Talmy. He said, if half of American lawns were replaced with native plants, we would create the equivalent of a 20 million acre national park. That's 9 times bigger than Yellowstone or 100 times bigger than Shenandoah National Park. Now that sounds incredible. But like I said, there's more to it than just not mowing. So let's talk about some of the advantages of native plants. Native plants, you can see on here, they co-evolved with our native insects. And also it's not just with our native insects, but within our climate. So they're better able to handle the weather that we have, the climate that we have. They do tend to have lower fertilizer and water inputs. You're going to see more wildlife, for better or for worse. There's also going to be increased water absorption. You have less runoff, so that is both water and nutrients. There are some things to keep in mind. It's not going to be maintenance free. If you do not maintain it, it will look weedy. And like I said, there's pros and cons for increased wildlife. And we're going to talk about that well, I'll just say some of it here. We all love to see birds. Birds are wonderful. That's great. We would love to have more insects in our garden. That is wonderful. There are some pests though that we might not want to have, like ticks, more chiggers, more mites. Some of the wildlife can actually bring that in. So let's talk about how to plan for that going forward. All right, there's a lot of text on the screen. This kind of a presentation really can take a lot longer. So I'm giving you highlights, but I wanted you to have as much information as possible. Some thoughts about lawn. There's a publication that I'll give you the link to after this, but there's a lot of things that are considered negative about lawns. There's a lot of water that you have to put on there. If you're trying to maintain a perfect monoculture lawn, there's going to be a lot of chemical treatments. Mowing your lawn with a gas-powered mower, 20 miles or running for 20 minutes, it can be the same as a car going for 20 miles. Or sorry, I got that wrong. Let me backtrack. Using a lawnmower, a gas-powered lawnmower for 1 hour is the same as driving a car for 20 minutes. So there can be a lot of negative impacts on our environment. On the other hand, that said, if we use best practices, we can actually mitigate some of those. So I'm not going to say that lawns are terrible. If we use battery-powered lawns, we actually don't have to worry about that kind of pollution. If we allow our lawns to go dormant, then that also is going to, if they go dormant during the summer, then we're not going to be putting as much water on them. So there's certain things that we can do that can actually mitigate those negatives that we hear about in the news. There are some benefits for lawns. They do provide that low maintenance if you do it right. Water resistant ground or wear resistant ground cover. It's a great place for walking paths. It's a great place for sports. Your kids playing out in the lawn. So there are definitely some advantages of lawn or having that short landscape in front of or near our house. So if you're thinking about lawns are terrible, I'm trying to let you know that there are some ways to manage a lawn that are less negatively impactful on our environment. You could also, instead of completely removing your lawn, there are some alternatives like having a native grass lawn or redefining your lawn, or maybe not having a monoculture lawn, so you allow lawn weeds, which can be wonderful. This picture is actually aromatic aster that can grow in lawns, and you can mow it and it just stays really short then. But it is definitely going to look different than a regular lawn. All right, so if you are going to do a native, like remove lawn and put in native plants, there are some things you need to think about. First of all, check your local regulations. Your city, your county, your HOA, your neighborhood, they all might have very specific regulations. And if you, even though this is a well-intending project, if it goes contrary to those local regulations, they can and will usually make you remove it. So before you get started, make sure you check those regulations. Do your research. You need to do a site analysis. You need to be do your soil test, know where your where light falls, where it's full sun, where it's part shade. Right plant, right place applies to native plants too. You're going to want to create a design. I would strongly recommend visiting native plantings so you can learn what you like, what you don't like. I strongly recommend starting small instead of removing all the lawn at once and starting with a full landscape. Start small because it takes time to learn how to maintain native plantings. So a little bit more detail. This is kind of a plan. This is the roadmap, I'd say. For your site assessment, first call 811. You need to locate those underground utilities. If you don't and you accidentally hit something, you can be responsible for those repairs, and that can be a lot. So just call 811 and they will mark the underground utilities. Again, know where your light falls in your yard and get that soil test. Also, make sure that you have access to water for these because most of these plants will take water at least for that first year when they're establishing. Again, create a design. The question was about how do I have a native plant that doesn't look weedy? Well, having a good design really is going to make a big difference. If you can make sure that you have low growing plants, like nothing really above 3 feet, that's going to help. Having intentionality, making it look like this is an intentional design is really important. Having things in bloom, like 1 to 3 plants that are blooming in all the seasons, that is nice. Also consider using plugs or planting kind of closely so that it fills up really quickly so you don't have weeds, because you are going to need to maintain this landscape and reduce the weeds so it doesn't look weedy, so you have the plants that you want. Okay, so that is all, you're planning that. You're planning what you're going to do. And then at that point, then you can start removing the lawn. There's multiple ways you can remove the lawn. You can solarize it, but then you're killing all the microbes. But it is one way to kill things surface level. You can use a sod cutter that can do it really fast. You can sheet mulch. Again, that can kill some of the microbes in the soil, but it's another way to do it. You can also spray kill using an herbicide, and it's actually an effective way to do it in a lot of places that do native plant installations. They actually will use an herbicide to kill the grass before putting things in. All right. At this point, then you can go ahead and start installing those plants. And like I said, consider plugs because they're going to grow fast. You can put a whole lot of things in there, and they're not too expensive if you're using plugs. And then mulch. Mulch looks like you mean it to be there. It looks like you mean the plantings to be there. It helps with that intentionality. And then it also has all the benefits that we talk about with maintaining the moisture and regulating the temperature fluctuations. So it looks good. Also, I'd recommend putting paths so that it's easy to walk around. And again, that helps with that look of intentionality. You might also consider having lawn borders around the outside so it looks like this is what you intend it to be. And then, of course, like I said, you're going to have to maintain it. Native plants do not mean no maintenance. They are less maintenance once they're established, but they are not no maintenance. So tips for success being a good neighbor: again, keep it tidy, keep it looking like it's intentional. I mentioned using shorter plants, that can help it look less weedy as well. Try, if you do have taller plants like 3 feet, 4 feet, have those be in the middle or towards the back. Also, choose varieties of plants that are not super aggressive, that aren't going to encroach on other people's properties. You also, like I said, have things that are blooming throughout the season. Again, having a mowed border, having wide paths, putting things in there like a bench or a fountain or sculptures, those also help it look intentional. Having a sign to give more information is wonderful. It's a good opportunity to educate others. Knowing about the plants that you have in your yard is going to be important, because if you do get reported, it really helps when you're talking to them and you can actually identify your plants by the scientific name if you can. That's helpful, but at least by a common name. It also helps when you're talking to your neighbors and able to identify all the different plants and being able to explain what their usefulness in the landscape is. Also, make sure that you can recognize any invasive or noxious weeds and remove those immediately. There are a lot of resources about native plants. I'm going to drop these in the chat so that you have these. Again, I strongly recommend starting small. Most of us can find places in our landscape where we can start with native plants with the landscape that we already have, and then you can build up from there. So there's a lot of benefits for natives. I strongly recommend that we plant natives when we can. And here are some ideas to help get you started. That's it for today.
Thank you, Tamara. All right. So now we're going to go to our second question for this garden hour, and is non-poisonous ideas for controlling moles in the residential garden. And I'm going to address that question. Let me go here a little. Oh, I lost it. Hold on a second. I lost my presentation, so give me a second, please.
While Ramon is finding his presentation, there was a question in the chat box about watering trees at this time. And it is very important that if you are in a county with drought, you still need to pay attention to your trees and your shrubs, and making sure that you water them. And if you are not doing it, stress can then appear, and that stress on the plant can then foster more insects or diseases to inhabit those trees and shrubs. And usually we won't see those happen for that stress appear for about 2 years. Are you ready, Ramon?
Debbie.
Okay.
Yes, thank
Good.
you. So here we go. Where is it? Hold on a second. There. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, I see it.
Thank you. So the question was about non-poisonous control, and we're gonna check a few things. There is a long list of things that we can do about controlling moles. The first thing is that we need to understand what's the difference between moles and voles. Essentially, moles eat, the base the diet of the mole is insects. So even though they're a nuisance in the garden because they do these tunnels, their main eaten food is insects, either white grubs, as you see in that picture, but also earthworms and other insects. So when they eat the whitegrass, they're doing a beneficial work, reducing. Whitegrass will eat the roots of plants, but earthworms have another beneficial work in the soil by aerating it and consuming other, producing more organic matter. But so in one way, they're beneficial, molds are beneficial, and another way, they're not so beneficial. But essentially, what we're looking to control them is because they're a nuisance. They do like these tunnels or runways that affect or influence or make the mowing of the grass, the lawn, more difficult. A differences of voles, the voles do not eat insects, they eat roots and part of the young trees, the cortex of young trees, and even they come up and eat the flower buds of your plants. But the voles eat mainly roots, they're vegetative, yeah. So we're gonna talk mostly about moles today. You can see here, the graph is on top is the two things that you're gonna see in your lawn. There is a mound of dirt here. The picture on the left is a mound of dirt there in comparison to a tunnel, as you see in the top graphic, and the right picture. The right picture, you see the tunnel. That one I opened the tunnel, surface tunnel. They're very shallow. And you can feel when you step that the soil is soft and you deep step down. And that makes it difficult for the mower too, because all those rich tunnels that you can see in the lawn. And that the red circle shows the tunnel that goes underground. They're very shallow, and that's the problem, and facilitate also the control. When you see the mound, that's usually when they dig deep down for winter passing or winter life and for nesting. So normally when you see runways, you don't see the tunnels, the mound. When you see the mound, that's where the tunnel goes deep underground, where they're nesting or overwintering. Yeah, and this is important when you use traps to control them, that we're going to talk about next slide. So some more facts here. We have some, as I mentioned, shallow tunnels. Usually those they use it in the spring, summer, and fall when they feed a lot. Actually, they feed all year round. They need a lot of food. But when you see the mound, those are deep permanent tunnels that they use during the winter or for nesting. They feed and rest every 2 hours and cycles, but they feed and rest every day, 7 days a week. They don't rest. I mean, they're great eaters. As I mentioned before, they're predators. They eat whitegrubs, earthworm, and other insects. So the main diet is insects. That constitutes 85% of the diet. And they consume quite a bit, 70 to 80% of their body weight daily. They have only 1 litter a year that reproduces 2 to 5 young each spring. In the spring, they come out. So they're nesting practically in the winter and the spring, and the litter come out in the spring. Yeah. For control method, there is, as I mentioned before, is more nuisance than the damage that they do. The problem is mowing these rich runways that they live in the lawn. One other thing that is being recommended is packing the soil. That makes it more difficult for them to do those tunnels, especially if you have a soft soil with a lot of organic matter. That's much easier for them to make those tunnels. But if you have a clay soil, that makes it more difficult for them to make those tunnels. Yeah, but if packing the soil might help, but it's not enough. Using repellent like castor oil is also being used and recommended, but it has a limited effect. There are other repellents in the market that, again, they're limited effect. The most effective way to control without poison is trapping. Yeah, but it's very challenging. A lot of times you don't get the moths right away, and you have to place it in different part or move it around your yard to finally catch one of them. If you disturb too much where you put the trap, the mole will sense a problem and it won't go through that runway. So it's very challenging, but once you get it, it's effective. Now, although the question did not ask for poison, there are other ways to control it, like using insecticide to kill the insect that they use. If they don't have food, they're gonna go somewhere else. And there are also baits but like the ones that I mentioned here. I don't have experience with them, but they are in the market, and you can try if you're willing to use poison. So let's see. Here are the example of the main traps used. Yeah, these are. Oh, I didn't write the names, but this is the tarpon. The one in the middle is the tarpon. The one on the right is a kind of a scissors that once it's triggered, it closes those scissors and trap the mole in it. The tarpon, it has some spikes in the bottom that will go down underground in the tunnel and catch those moles. The one on top right, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. The one on the right is the scissors. The one on the left top is it catches with rubber, so it's kind of a lasso that would cover when they run in there, triggering, and they get caught in a lasso and kind of catch them and maybe strangulate them and kill them. This other one in the bottom, I'm not sure what exactly it is that it has. It seems like it's the scissor type that it got trapped that mold in there. So those are the main type of traps that you can use. There is an extension publication that will give you more information in detail how to use these traps. But essentially, when you buy these traps, you're gonna have some information how to set them in the garden. So I would recommend to follow those instructions and check this publication from MU Extension that will give you some more details on how to set those traps. This is a figure of how to set the traps or where to set the traps. Again, you have to differentiate between the mound that they leave when they dig down, deep down in the soil, in comparison to the runway like the top figure shows. And in this other figure, you can see all these tunnels around, all the runways around, and the mounds are in here. So the mounds, they make the hole deep, and usually putting the traps where the mounds is not effective. So you have to avoid to put the traps close to a mound. You have to put the traps here where this arrow shows, where in the runways where they're more active, especially after in the spring and the summer, where they're looking for food more than being in the deep part of the nesting area. When they're in the spring and in the summer is where they use mostly the top runways, and there's where you have to put the traps. Pay attention to the description on how to do it, because again, if you disturb the soil too much, you have to open the runway to put the traps, but try to do a minimum disturbance around the runway where to put you put the traps.
I hope this information will help you decide what kind of plastic or what kind of mulch.
I'm sorry. Anyway, that's what I have for today, but pay attention to how to set those traps in the lawn, and you will have a good results trapping those moles. So we're gonna go now. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll try to address them later. So now we're gonna go to our next question of the day, and Manoj is gonna address it. And the question is about in what circumstances should I should you aerate the lawn versus to dethatch a lawn. Even when our lawn is cut frequently, at least once per week, the clipping seems to sit on top of the grass, requiring us to rake up the excess. How can we avoid this? Manoj?
Yes, I think you can see my slides okay and hear me okay. So in these questions, there are two parts. Let's break it down. The first part is, what's the difference between aeration and de-thatching, and how do I know which one to do for my lawn? Very good questions, especially for at this time of the year. Just before we head into this, let's understand that aeration or de-thatching, both has the same purpose. And the purpose and the goal is to allow nutrients, air, and water to penetrate deep down to the root zone where they need that most. Okay, the objectives is the same, but the way we do that is different depending on what the situation we have. And let's understand what do we need to do for what. So aeration is basically punching holes in the yard, right? They have these tines which can pull the cores, and those cores will eventually break it down, and that's how you are opening up the soil surface to allow those inputs to go penetrate deep down to the root zone. So this is basically correcting your compacted soil. Because of the compaction in the soil, your roots are not having enough inputs to grow. So your roots development are restricted, and your aerations will help to elevate some of those. And this practice is done more likely in an annual basis, which is a routine management regime, especially in the heavy clay soil, and done that very much in fall time at this time of the year, September, October, November, earlier the better, so that they have enough time to repair themselves and recover from that stress of aeration. Again, I'm talking about cool season. For the warm season, the story is different. We do that in summer, but for the cool season, like tall fescue, bluegrass, we do that now in the fall time. Now, coming back to de-thatching, this is done slightly differently. Let me show you here the image of thatch. Okay, there it is. So when you look at this core of soil, we have grass blades and crown, and then we have soil beneath. Anything in between that crown and soil, we call it thatch layer. And this is basically a decomposition of organic matter over time, and it accumulates on your yard. So depending on how thick that thatch is, our turf grass health is going to be impacted. We want to have that thatch layer. Again, it's the organic matter from dead stolons, rhizomes, and clippings. So that thatch layer, we want to have it less than ½ inch. So if you have that thatch layer more than ½ inch, that's going to be a problem in the long run. So thicker the thatch, the more severe the problem is going to be, and it takes more time to correct that. So if you have a thatch layer more than ½ inch, then that will actually block your water, in your air, your nutrients, the fertilizers, the like insecticides and fungicides you apply on the above ground that needs to go to the soil zone. It's all get blocked by the thatch layer. Therefore, managing that thatch layer less than ½ inch is very critical for turf grass health. Now, how do we do that? We can do manually by using some rake, which we call de-thatching rake. It's just a hard metal prongs that it basically calms your grass. Again, be mindful that when you are de-thatching, you are not removing stolons or rhizomes if you have, or roots. Make sure they are not uprooting those, and it's only removing the dead materials from that lawn. Okay? So that's the purpose of de-thatching, just calming. And depending on how thick thatch layer you have a different options here. So rake's going to be very gentle. Your power rake is more aggressive. It's a fuel powered equipment, and if you have a thatch layer more than an inch, then we would recommend using power rake, because just hand raking becomes too much of a job. So verticutter is again in the most aggressive side of de-thatching. If your thatch layer is more than 1½ inch, then you might go that route, but it's a very heavy equipment. It removes a lot of materials, and it needs time to recover. It's more like the blades are going vertically, it's slicing and removing those dead materials on the top, and that's why you see a lot of materials removed by verticutter. Generally, it's more applicable when you want to do a major renovation and put down seeds. But in general, like a routine wise, you don't do detaching all the time, and you can do slight raking, but not the heavy detaching with the power raking or verticutter. So this is not a routine maintenance like aeration. And you do detaching at the end of the winter or early spring for cool season lawns. Like here in late February, early March will be the time to do detaching. Another part of this question was, I have this lawn situation where I mow and I always see a lot of clippings on the top of my lawn. It's very annoying to get rid of those. How do I deal with that? So, well, this can be a situation because of two main reasons. First, your mowing is not proper. It's too infrequent. You are not keeping up with the growth of the grass. You are removing much more than you should because of that late mowing. And other reasons can be the soil fertility status of your soil. Your soil might have excess nutrients, or you are putting down more fertilizers on your lawn. So how do we know about this? Let's go with the first situation here where we are not doing the proper mowing. So how do we do proper mowing? Anytime you go and mow there, we have to follow this 1/3 rule. It's basically every time you mow, you only remove top 1/3 growth. For example, if you have 3-inch tall grass, then you mow just 1/3, that is 1 inch, and then you will have 2-inch mowing height. Okay. Let's say, for example, if you have a tall fescue lawn, which we recommend to mow at 3-inch mowing height, then you will mow as soon as your grass reaches 4.5-inch tall. If you wait until your grasses reaches 5-inch or 6-inch tall, then every time you mow there, you are removing a lot more materials than 1/3. So that will, on the one hand, put stress on your grass. On the other, you will have a lot of materials to deal with in terms of clippings. So that's not an ideal situation that you want to be in. So you want to go there and to get an idea how fast your grass is growing, you can go and measure with a scale how tall your grass is from the soil line and what height you want to maintain, so you know how frequently you want to mow that. So mowing once a week in some situation might be too late for some of you who has healthy grass and growing at a good pace. And sometimes when you apply too much fertilizers, that situation happens because generally folks don't want to do the soil test. So we recommend that you do the soil test and understand the soil fertility status of your soil. The recommendation here for the nitrogen fertilizers is 2 to 4 pounds per 1,000 for a cool season lawn. Again, there's a 2 to 4 pounds is a range, right? So the folks which want to do the high maintenance, they can put down 4 pounds, and they have to do mowing every 3 to 4 days. But the folks who want to do low maintenance lawn, they can do just 2 pounds per 1,000, and for them, they might not have to go mow every 3 to 4 days. So depending on how much nutrients you have in your soil, the growth will be different, and therefore the mowing requirement is also different. Again, if you are in a situation where you are out on the vacation or somewhere, or you don't have time to mow that, then you can also run mower twice. It's a labor intensive, but if you are having that situation a lot, then you can run the mower once in one direction and again in the other directions twice, so that you can chop and shred that clippings. And once you can break down any smaller size, smaller than the dime size, then it can naturally filter back to the canopy. Or alternatively, you can also use mulching blades. Compared to these straight regular blades, the mulching blades has more capacity to break down those clippings into finer pieces, so you don't have to deal with a lot of raking. Again, just want to point out that some people might want to do with the bagging the clippings, but that's not an ideal practice. Leaving clippings on the lawn is the ideal practice for the sake of environment, and also not having to dispose that materials to the wastes and landfills. And also several studies have shown that leaving clippings on the lawn will not build up your thatch, contrary to what people believe. So that is all from my side, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Manoj. So we're gonna go to another question, and is asking, can I grow persimmon tree in Carthage if I mulch and wrap it in the winter? And Donna is gonna address this question. Donna?
So for those that don't know where Carthage is, it's in the southwest portion of the state. So if you look at the range of persimmons in Missouri, it is widespread across Missouri, being hardy. And so therefore it has no problems growing in the southern part of Missouri or the central part of Missouri. So in short order, yes, you can grow persimmons in Carthage and not have to protect it because it is a hardy plant. Scientific name is Diospyros virginiana. It's very hardy, -20 to 25. Keep in mind, if you want to produce fruit off the persimmon trees, they come male or female. And so you have to have male and female trees present in order for cross-pollination to occur to be able to get the fruit. Keep in mind that the fruit is astringent until the fruit is fully ripened. A lot of people think that it needs to be frosted on before it can be harvested, but that is not the case. It ripens right around October 15th to 20th, depending on where you are in the state. So they're ripening about right now, but most people have believe that they need to have a frost because ripening typically happens in conjunction with the first frost. I will tell you that persimmons are probably one of my most favorite trees because they have such beautiful dark green leaves and the bark is amazing on the trees. It's just a unique pattern. It's a big blocky bark that is just really has a nice architectural appeal to it that can really set off in a landscape. So it's a very beautiful tree in addition to the fruit that it can produce. Well-drained soils, pH 5.8 to 6.5. So it is very tolerant to a lot of soils as well as the type of soil it's in. Full sun, drought resistant, easily grown from seed or hardwood cuttings. 60 years is about the life expectancy. There are some improved cultivars that you can get your hands on. They produce the larger fruit, less seeds, more pulp, and that's what you want if you're interested in growing persimmons for the fruit. And so if you're interested in that, I would jot down these varieties and try to seek them out because these are the improved varieties. So as you look at the picture, the one on the far right is a native persimmon. So it's small and it usually has several seeds in it that in the pulp. But if you look towards the right, those are more of the improved cultivated varieties. And those are the ones that are listed here. So they're going to be a lot bigger. Remember, they are still astringent, which means that they're a bitter, mouth puckering taste to it up until it's fully ripe, and at that point you can eat them and they're nice and sweet. A lot of people will confuse these with the oriental persimmons. We typically cannot grow the oriental persimmons well because they're zone 7 to 10, and most of Missouri is 5B to 6B, and so we're a little too cold. So in years when we get below 10 degrees, there's a chance of losing them. If you are interested in oriental persimmons, you might look for a hybrid that is a cross between the American or native ones and they're crossed with the orientals, and those are listed below. A little bit different names. These can also be found out there. They're larger fruits. Once again, there's going to be a combination of some are astringent and some are non-astringent. It just depends on the variety. So with that, yes, you can grow persimmons without protecting them if you go with the improved cultivars that are the American or the native persimmon that we have. So back to you, Ramon.
Thank you, Donna. So we're gonna go our next topics about honeysuckles, and John is gonna address that subject.
All right. So when it comes to bush honeysuckle, the most popular variety, I guess, the non-native or invasive species would be the Amur honeysuckle on there. There's a couple of more, but it is an invasive species. So I just wanted to start out as what's an invasive plant. An invasive species, basically the definition, if you look at the USDA website, is like a non-native or alien to the ecosystem under consideration. And those that are introduced that can cause or likely to cause an environmental or economic harm to our environment or to the human health. So these invasive species, the impact on those, the invasive species basically are competing directly with our native species for the moisture, sunlight, nutrients, and space. Overall, plant diversity can be decreased when it comes with the invasive species, and establishment and spread of invasive species really can reduce wildlife habitat in our woodland areas also. The common name basically is bush honeysuckle. There's a few varieties out there, but I'm just going to revert to bush honeysuckle. Basically, the bush honeysuckle shades out our native wildflowers and our young native trees that are in our forest floors. They also secrete a chemical into the soil that can hinder the growth of our native trees on there. Birds are tempted to nest in these the bush honeysuckle on there, but they are basically suffer higher nesting issues and stuff when because they're too close to the ground when it comes to that. So it's not good for our wildlife on there. I have the map that kind of shows you. It's everywhere. It's spread everywhere. It was introduced in the late 1800s for ornamental bush. It also later on was being used for erosion control, and it's just spread from there. When we're looking at bush honeysuckle, how to identify it, it can be it's a large upright shrub. It can go to 15 to 20 feet. The flowers change colors, so it kind of goes from white to yellow. And the berries, you see them probably right now on there. I know we get a lot of calls on identifying them. They're very red, looks very juicy red on there. It is pretty, but we don't want it. The leaves are opposite and they're simple on there. A lot of the invasive species, and in bush honeysuckle is one of them. They green up earlier than our native vegetative. So in the spring, you'll see them, they'll be green sooner, and then they green and then they don't die down. They're later in the fall on there. So we really see it. So if you kind of look at that in our woodland, especially in our woodland areas, they're an understory shrub in the woodlands, and they just kind of choke out any of our native trees seedlings that might come through. The flowers are pretty, so they normally flower between May to June. They're pretty fragrant. The petals will go from white or pink, and then they'll start changing yellow with the age on there. Here's the fruit I was talking about on there. So normally we're seeing the fruit now. So September to October is when it kind of matures on there. They're little red berries. They have a lot of sugar content, but they don't give a lot of protein for our wildlife. So they don't put on the fat, I guess you want to, that they would need for the winter time on there. When we're trying to manage this, and we do want to manage this, they might be pretty, but they are an invasive species, and they do a lot of harm to our ecosystem on there. So trying to control them, you can do a mechanical control. So they are pretty shallow rooted when they're young. So the young plants, normally we can pull up by hand when the soil is moist. Obviously, when we're going through the drought, the soil is not moist, so it can kind of be hard to get them picked up. But young plants are pretty shallow rooted, so you can normally do that. They do have a grabbing tool that can aid pulling the larger plants out. That is pretty labor intensive. Another cultural control on there would be a prescribed fire. You can take the prescribed fire and you can burn these. Basically, you're killing the seedlings, or you normally are top killing any of the larger ones, but you're setting those seedlings back on there and kind of using up their root reserve. A chemical control, when you look at it, the research kind of is saying foliar applications has the tendency to be most effective way of controlling the bush honeysuckle on there. Glyphosate or triclopyr are the active ingredients, herbicides that is the most effective when you're kind of controlling this. We want to apply the foliar applications when the plant is leafed out. Normally, fall's a good time to treat these with them before the leaves turn yellow. So, and if you're using a glyphosate's a non-selective herbicide. So if you get it on anything else, it's going to kill that. So doing it in the fall when maybe our native vegetation's leaves have already dropped on there, but the bush honeysuckle leaves are out, it's a good time to treat that. You could do a basal bark application on there, plants 4 inches in diameter or less, and that's going to be with the triclopyr rate on there. Or you can do a cut stump. I'm just going to say that if anybody has been battling bush honeysuckle, it's a sprouter. So if we do cut it, you're going to need to treat it quickly on there, because it does like to sprout up from there on that. And we want to basically treat that stump within 10 minutes of cutting it before it basically heals up, and then the chemical can't be moved through. We always have to do a disclaimer when we're talking about herbicides or chemicals on there. Always read and follow the label directions. That's the law. And when you're chemically treating plants over or near water areas, you need to use a herbicide that's labeled for aquatic systems on there. Some resources out there: Missouri Invasive Plant Task Force. That's a really good website to go to. There's also the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network, and Missouri Department of Conservation, MDC, has an invasive field guide that kind of helps control that. So thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. So with that is all for today, and we're going to go to Donna to wrap up this garden hour today.
Okay, just give me a second. I'm trying to find my slide that's disappeared. Oh, well, okay. So that is all we have for you today. Remember that we are back to our monthly format. So we are meeting on the third Wednesday of the month at noon. Let me see if I can try to get this up. It's not, for some odd reason, it's not sharing. I'm sorry. I was going to show you the where you can go to find the videos. Remember that we do have the videos where you can go to YouTube page. It's the MUIPM YouTube page. And also remember that you can save your chat if you go to chat and click on the 3 buttons to the right. And you right click on that and you can save your chat, and that'll save all the links that we posted today. And of course, if you have any questions whatsoever, you can always go to that website, re-register, and ask your questions and share your pictures at that point. So at this point, I guess we are done for the day. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of your day.